I've officially opened up an FHSA, or a First Home Savings Account, aka Canada's newest registered investment account. Now, in case you missed it, in April 2023, so pretty much exactly a year ago, the Canadian government launched this account to help people with saving for their first home. Now, the high-level explanation is that you have to be a first-time home buyer, and you also can't use it to buy an investment property, because the purpose of the account is to help people actually be able to afford a home to live in, which of course makes sense. And there's also a lifetime contribution limit of $40,000. Also, once you open an account, you can only have it open for up to 15 years. So once you hit that point, you have to use the money inside to either buy a home, or you can transfer it to your RRSP instead. Now, last year when this account first launched, I wasn't in a place with my money or in my investing journey to open one up at the time. I was instead really focused on maxing out my TFSA first. Now, I'm pretty sure in April of last year, I had about $40,000 contributed to my TFSA. It's a loose number. I do know I for sure had $35,000 contributed in January of that year, so I was sitting at about $40,000 in there, and my goal at the time was to max it out by the end of the year, which I was able to do. Then I actually updated you guys a few weeks ago when I officially maxed it out again once the 2024 new yearly contribution limit was added. So that was $7,000 for this year, bringing me up to a total of $69,500 contributed to my TFSA, and now I'm officially done with it until January of 2025, so next year, when the new yearly contribution room limit is added again. Now, the next account that I knew I wanted to take advantage of was the FHSA for a few different reasons. Obviously, Dennis and I want to buy a house one day. Now, our current focus is on buying a rental property first, mostly because real estate is extremely expensive and we can't really afford to buy anything in the GTA, but we really love living in Toronto. So our short-term plan is to continue to rent in the city and then buy a property in a lower cost of living city that we can rent out, and then one day leverage that house to help us buy a house for us to actually live in further down the line. Now, with all of that being said, I can't actually use my FHSA to buy that first investment property, but I can use it to buy our primary residence in the future. Now, I want to start investing for that now so that my money actually has more years to grow in the meantime until we get to that point. The other reason that opening up an FHSA next was a good option for me is all the different tax advantages and benefits that you get with this account compared to the other investment account options. Now, you get the benefits of a TFSA and an RRSP kind of all wrapped up into one with the FHSA. The first thing you can do is that the money you contribute can be used to reduce your taxable income, just like an RRSP, and your money's also growing tax-free, just like in a TFSA. So because I am someone who's planning on buying a home one day, it makes more sense for me to utilize this account first before moving on to my RRSP, since I can still use the FHSA to reduce my taxable income up to $8,000 per year, as long as you actually contribute that much, until you hit the lifetime max limit of $40,000. So to sum all of that up, because I do want to buy a primary residence one day, and because of all the nice perks that the FHSA offers, it was time for me to open one up. Okay, so after deciding that I wanted to open up an FHSA, the next step was deciding where I wanted to open one and also what I wanted to invest in within my FHSA. Now, the only other investing that I've done so far in my life is all for the long term. I personally use my TFSA to invest for retirement, which is still multiple decades away, which means that my money is going to be invested for a long, long time. And it also means that it has the ability to kind of ride the waves of the stock market. What I mean by that is if you look at a stock market, I'm going to use the US total stock market as like a simple, easy example here. Over the long term, like if you look at between 2001 to 2004, it's always trending upwards. But if you look at a smaller period of time, like between December 2021 and December 2023, the return could be negative. Now, if you're investing for the long term, like I am for retirement, then I can handle a 2-year negative return as long as the long-term return over 20 years is more likely to be positive. Now, with the FHSA, the purpose of this account is to use the money to buy a house, which is obviously a more shorter term goal. So you don't necessarily have as long to risk the ups and downs that could happen over only a few year period. So everything I just mentioned is factored into my decision-making process, but I also have to look at my specific situation, so let's get into covering that. Personally, Dennis and I don't see ourselves buying a primary residence for a while, mostly because, like I already mentioned earlier, houses are really expensive, and we also have a few different money goals that we want to hit before we do that. One of those goals is buying an investment property, like I mentioned before, which is still a very expensive purchase and would obviously deplete the savings that we allocate towards that, so that's happening first. The other thing and the other goal for us is to continue to invest as much as possible when we're young, for retirement and for the long term. Obviously, the earlier you invest, the longer you have for your money to grow over the long term, and that's something that we really want to continue to do and prioritize prioritize now when we can. And then the last thing is that there's just other expenses and things that we want to spend our money on that can be hard to do if you become house poor because you're buying a personal house for yourself that isn't necessarily a good investment for your money. So those are some of the other money goals we have. So knowing that all of those things are likely happening before we buy a house for ourselves to live in, and the time it'll take to save up, to build equity in our rental property, all of those different things, we think it'll probably be about 5 to 10 years before we buy that house for ourselves to live in full time. At least that's our current thought process or plan for right now. Things could definitely change for sure, but that's the idea that we're working with. So now that I know that I'm going to be opening up an FHSA and that I won't be using the money inside for 5 to 10 years, what am I actually going to be investing in? After doing my research, there's 2 investment options that I was considering. Now, the first one is GICs, and in general, GICs are considered a safe investment because you're guaranteed to not lose any money. Basically, how it works is that you put in a set amount of money for a predetermined amount of time, and then you're guaranteed to get your money back that you put in afterwards, and you're also going to get a little bit of interest on top of that, and that interest rate is at a predetermined set amount as well. Now, the biggest pro for GICs is that you won't lose any money, which is obviously nice in general, but it's specifically helpful when you're going to need your money at a specific point in time. Like if you went into your FHSA to take that money out to buy a house and you'd lost money, that obviously would not be ideal. Now, on the other hand, you're also capping your growth with GICs. Yes, you're guaranteed to have your money grow by a specific amount, but it also won't grow by a lot. It's a fairly small amount, often comparable to how much your money would grow within a high interest savings account. The other thing about GICs is that your money's locked in when you buy them. So if we look, for example, at these GICs that EQ Bank offers, their current rate is 5.35% for a 1-year GIC, and then the rate goes a little bit lower as you lock it in for longer periods of time. So again, you're guaranteed an interest rate and to grow your money a bit, but you also can't access your money and you can't grow it beyond the interest rate that's set. Now, the other thing that I was personally thinking about when it comes to buying GICs is that, let's say I bought a 1-year GIC and locked in my money for that amount of time. That means a year from now, I'd have to go in and rebuy another investment with that money because it's no longer invested after that 1-year mark. Isn't a big deal, but it is a little bit more active work from that POV. Now, the other option I was considering is investing in ETFs. ETFs are like a basket of different types of investments all put into one product for you, and there are so many different funds out there that vary in risk level. You could invest in funds that just have stocks in them, or ones that have stocks and bonds, like a mix of both. You could invest in funds that only invest in American companies, or ones that have a mix of global companies all spread out. Now, actually picking an ETF is all about balancing how much risk versus reward payoff you want to take on, and the biggest consideration for that is how long your money is going to be invested for. Now, in general, investing in ETFs is almost always going to be riskier than investing in a GIC because your money's not locked in and you're not guaranteed those returns, but then you can still play with how much riskier of an ETF you'd want to go with. So at first, before really doing that whole deep dive, I definitely thought I'd be going with the GIC approach, which is still an option if you're watching this, but the more I thought about it, and after specifically factoring in that I'm almost for sure not going to be using this money for at least 5 years, I started leaning more towards investing in an ETF that'll hopefully give me a larger return than a GIC would. The biggest reason really is the time horizon. If I was going to be using this money within 3 years instead, I'd probably be more concerned about the potential to have even less money in my account than I contributed to it. But considering that I still have 5+ years to go, I really would like to see my money grow as much as possible in order for me to have more money to use towards putting towards buying a house in the future. That's kind of the whole reason why I'm opening up and funding an FHSA right now anyway, instead of just focusing on saving for the rental property that we're going to be buying first. It's because I want my money to have as much time to grow as much as possible, so I want to actually grow it and give it a chance to have a higher return rate. I also saw someone post something about how we only have a few tax-free vehicles in Canada anyway, so you might as well take advantage, and that definitely resonated for me personally in my situation. I also know that I can still choose an ETF that's less volatile, which brings me to the next decision, which is what ETF am I going to be buying within my FHSA. Also, quick aside before I get into that, it's been kind of interesting going through this process of making these decisions in a short period of time. Before now, I've definitely been changing up my investment strategy and doing things over several years, but this is decision all in a row, which has been interesting to see. Anyways, I thought about a balanced ETF like XBAL or VBAL. I'm going to pull up XBAL on the screen and you can see that it's about 60% equities and 40% fixed income, and this is what the 5-year return looks like. But Dennis and I also now both invest in XEQT as our one fund solution ETF within our TFSAs, so for the long term, and it's already a lower risk ETF because it has a lot of global diversification. So basically it's diversified differently. It has that global diversification instead of asset class diversification. Now, I kind of felt like, considering that XBAL has been at a loss over the short term in the past too, that I'd rather just continue to invest in XEQT within my FHSA as well. Now, I want to be very clear that I'm not saying that you should invest in this specific ETF at all. I am saying that two options I'd consider are GICs and ETFs depending on your time horizon, but then it's like a whole other step to dig into what specific GICs or ETFs that you would want to consider. So with that decision finally being made, let's go ahead and open up my FHSA. Now, I'm going to be sticking with Wealthsimple because I like their platform a lot and they offer FHSAs, so let's go ahead and open one up together. Okay, so I opened up my Wealthsimple app and I think it's going to be pretty easy to open up an FHSA account. I'm just going to go to add an account. I specifically want to use it to trade stocks, options, and crypto because that includes ETFs like XEQT. Then I'm going to choose the FHSA option. Again, they give you a little bit of information about the account as well, which is great. Continue. Let's make sure the account's right for you. Again, they kind of go over the rule. Actually, they do go over the specific FHSA rules, so you can see them on screen too. Yeah, that's it. Next up is just adding money to the account. So my plan is I'm gonna do $2,000 per month for the next 4 months. So because my yearly contribution limit for this account is $8,000, obviously that'll help me hit that $8,000. And $2,000 is already what I can put towards my investments on a monthly basis to begin with. So I'm gonna make it automatic for 4 months and then just put in a reminder for myself to cancel it once 4 months is up. So yeah, I might as well do that. Make a deposit right now. It's going to be coming from my checking account. I'm going to be doing a monthly one starting due towards the end of the month. And then, like I said, $2,000. Okay, so that's it. Now I'm going to confirm it's going from my checking account to my Wealthsimple FHSA every month towards the end of the month, $2,000 for the next 4 months. I just need to make sure I remember to cancel it. Let's submit. And that's it. So now I've opened my FHSA. I've already set up my first recurring deposits. And that's it for me. It's now all set up and I'm happy I got to do it with you guys. So that's a wrap on me opening up my FHSA and my current FHSA investment strategy. I want to hear all of your thoughts on this, so let us know in the comments below. Let me know what you think. If you have an FHSA, all the thoughts you have, let us know down below. And if you haven't seen this previous video we posted about how I maxed out my TFSA, make sure you check that out next, and we'll be back next week with another video.